Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. Hope you had a good day at work. If you're new, this is your first time here, please don't forget to subscribe, share, like, comment, interact. We're here for you. My name is Chioma Moma, and I'm a lawyer. I'm an author. I do so many things. I'm also here to support parents as we do this journey of parenthood, parents and parents to be. And today we have a very, very interesting topic. We're talking about fighting addiction, what every parent needs to know, what every parent should know. And we have a very special guest. His name is David Folarami. He's a father of two. I'll let him do the introduction himself, but he has a lot to share, and I just can't wait to have him join us. So, David, hi, David.
Hi, mom. Good evening.
Good evening. Good to have you here. So we're live, and I'm going to have people. People have already started coming in. We already have people who are already viewing with us, and I will allow them to just get into the comment. But before I ask my first question, I would just like you to do your own intro in your own words. Who is David?
Okay, good evening again. Thank you very much for having me. Good evening to everyone who is joining us. Um, David Folarami is a mental health advocate, an addiction therapist, and counselor. Part of what I do is help people in their journey recovery, through the recovery process, because like I was speaking to somebody today, recovery is not a destination but a journey. So I'm that person who is willing to work with people who are struggling with addiction, or people who have come out of active addiction to get in that journey of recovery. uh, I was also I also struggled with addiction for 7 years, addiction and dependence to substances of various types. So I think I'm in one of the best positions to be able to help people come out of it because I've walked the path that they are currently walking. Aside my experiences with my struggles with addiction, I've also had extensive training at home and abroad on addiction recovery, uh, drug abuse prevention, and treatment. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, David. And before we go any further, I want to just encourage those who are here, the few of you who are already on live with us, please go ahead and share. Invite your friends to come and be part of this because we're going to ask questions to David. I want to ask him a few questions which I really think are important. So, I discovered you was my. I was talking to my son. We're talking about how a lot of young people are struggling with substance abuse and how it's become such a popular thing where so many young people are users of drugs. And he said, "Oh, he watched your interview." And I had to go and watch it, and of course, it was I was blown away with the whole story. Can you give us, like, in a nutshell, 20 minutes if you can, tell us your story, share it with us so that we can better relate and know what you went through from, and I want the story from like you said, you came out of addiction at a very young age.
Oh, you've gone off. I can't hear you anymore. The sound is off. Yes. But do you want me to continue my story while you try to fix your sound? I don't know if the other participants can hear me. I can go on. Just nod if you'd like me to go on. Okay, so that's fine. Thank you very much. Before I go into my story, I'll just buttress on a point you made when you said your son spoke to you about my story, and then he said that a lot of young people are beginning to struggle with substance use and dependence. A few months ago, I was in Lagos for we're shooting a documentary on addiction, and then I got a call from a mother, a frantic call about her 13-year-old son who had started using substances. And then because of how busy I was, I couldn't attend to her. So I referred her to another addiction professional to handle the case, either start seeing the young boy or make referrals, things like that. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I was back in my home in Enugu State. And then I remembered the woman who called me. So I decided to call her back to know how her son was doing. And then when I reached out to her, she told me that her 13-year-old son had passed on from a drug overdose. So for parents out there who are listening, um, the 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 demography of people who are struggling with addiction, the age range has reduced so much. So we have 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds who now struggle with addiction and double in substance use. Talking about my story, I was born into a Christian family. My parents would always take us to church because that was their idea of parenting at the time, because they were very religious people, and they just felt that if my brothers and I were always in church, we will turn out right. And so this extended to the types of schools we went to. We went to mission primary schools, mission secondary schools, and then I went to Covenant University for my first degree. Ironically, it was on these same grounds of Covenant University that I had my first exposure to drug use. This was 2 years into my program. A group of friends and I walked into where we have as the university library currently. It was still under construction at the time. And then I saw some of my schoolmates, my classmates, using substances. I mean, what I now know is marijuana and cigarettes and alcohol. So at the time, I didn't indulge in this, but it had created an impression on my mind about what substances were and what effect it could do to a person. And by effect, at that time, what I could see was what looked to me like euphoria.
Mm.
Um, these people looked like they were in cloud nine. These people looked like they were genuinely happy about where they were and what they were doing. All of my mother's words before I went to school about knowing the son of who you are, knowing where you came from, began to kick in, and I knew this was wrong. But at the same time, I saw these people look very happy. So there was a battle in my mind on, should I indulge? Should I not indulge? These people look good, but my mom says I shouldn't do this. But as God will have it, I was able to sail through school without using substances. And every time I share this story, I like to make a point here to our parents that it's not about where you take your children to that determines the outcome of their lives. It's about what you have put inside of them. It's about what you've planted inside of them. Um, as parents, last year I was invited to speak in Canaan Land at the International Youth Alive Convention, which is a yearly convention for youths across the globe from our church. And then while I was speaking at the session, a young girl said to me that she had come for that program with hard drugs. Now, she had come for that program not only to use hard drugs in the program, but to also with an intent to distribute it to other persons. So I'm just trying to buttress the point here. I'm not saying do not take your kids to good schools, mission schools, youth boot camps. I mean, summer is around the corner. We're going to start seeing so many boot camps left, right, and center. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but I'm saying equip them with enough information, enough knowledge on these things and how to say no to them. So back to my story. After Cornell University, I had my mandatory NYSC service in Abuja, and then I proceeded to the United Kingdom for my master's. At this point, I lived with two Europeans, one from Spain, the other from Italy, and these people were also indulged in drug use. So Little by little, I started experimenting because that's the first phase. It's always the experimentation phase. I started experimenting with these substances that they were abusing. These included ketamine, mushrooms, marijuana, ecstasy, and maybe cigarettes. And so I was doing this for the period while I was studying. And then after a while, I got back to Nigeria, and a friend of mine introduced me to a drug called crack cocaine. Crack cocaine is one of the most psychologically dependent substances, very addictive, very elusive, very expensive, and it's such a horrible drug. It happened so quickly that I got addicted before I knew it, and I started spending all of the money I had saved up. Uh, in the first 5 months of using crack cocaine, I spent in excess of 3 million naira on drug use and drug related activities. And then I started selling my things. I had a nicely furnished apartment. I sold everything inside of it. I sold my car. And then I asked the landlord to give me the balance of my rent. Now, let me pause here to give you a definition of addiction before I go on, because we're talking about addiction, fighting addiction. You cannot fight something you do not know or understand. So,
Mhm.
in putting my story in perspective, I would like to quickly give you an accurate definition of addiction. Addiction is a chronic, relapsing brain disease characterized by the need to indulge in a behavior or consume a substance, irrespective of its harmful consequences. I'll take that again. Addiction is a chronic, relapsing brain disease characterized by the compulsive need to indulge in a behavior or consume a substance, irrespective of its harmful consequences. Two words here I want you to take note of. Number one, addiction is a disease. It's not a moral failure. It's not a behavior. It's not a characteristics. It is a disease, and it's a disease of the mind. So once we have this knowledge, we understand how to handle it better. Secondly, addiction is synonymous with compulsion. Remember, I said it's compulsive. Compulsive. What does that mean? It makes you do things with or without your consent. It becomes imperative that you do these things. I always like to give the example of compulsory courses in university, where they say if you don't pass this course, you can't go to the next level. That's sort of how addiction works. It's compulsive. It makes you do things. It forces you to do things. So when I say I had spent all these monies I talk about, I'd sold my property, I'd sold my car, and I was about to collect the balance of my rent from my landlord, it is the compulsive nature of addiction that was pushing me. So I took the balance of my rent, and then shortly afterwards, somebody introduced me to what we call the bunks. Now, the bunks are otherwise known as trap houses, and I think the Westerners accurately christened it trap
Trap.
houses because trap, trap, like a trap.
Okay. A trap
Yes,
house. Okay.
trap house. Yes. So they accurately christened it trap houses because that is literally what it is. Once you get into any of these places, you are hooked, you are trapped, you're stuck. So I had collected the balance of my rent from my landlord, which was about 750,000 in 2011. So we know what that amount of money could get you at that time. And so somebody took me to the bunk, the trap house. And as soon as I got there, I saw so many people. I saw young people, I saw old people, I saw male, I saw female, I saw nursing mothers, I saw pregnant girls, all bound by the same thing, uh, addiction. And at these trap houses, it's an open market for the sale of these drugs where nobody is hiding to use. Anybody can walk in to buy, just like you're going into a provision store. And the thing about it is, you don't have to buy and leave. You can actually buy and stay there and use the drugs there, sleep there if you want, and things like that. So this 750,000 I'd collected from my landlord, I spent all of it there in less than 5 days, about 5 days. And so I was now trapped because I had nowhere to go to. I was I was I was trapped in the bunk. And then one of the most extreme cases of what the compulsive nature of addiction can do to a person is something I experienced a few months into my stay in the bunk. Now, remember, I'd sold all of my property, I spent all of my money, I had nowhere to go. So these people in the bunk, who are all struggling with the same disease of addiction to substances, had become my family. There was a young girl. There was a young girl who was pregnant at the time, and she gave birth in the bunk. She didn't know, according to her, she didn't know who the father of the child was. And 2 weeks after the birth of her baby boy, the compulsion to use drugs came again. And she was approached by one of the dealers in the bunk, and he was asking her to sell her baby for he was asking her to sell her baby for some money and for some drugs. And now this is not a story I was told. I was sitting right next to her when they were having the conversation. You know, I expected her to say no, but then she sold the child. Now, this is not me judging her because, like I like to tell people, I may have done the same thing if I was a lady with a child. You know, I had just sold all of my property, collected the money of my rent, and all of those kind of things. So what she had was that child. That was the only thing she could exchange for money to get drugs, and she sold the child. Now, that's an extreme case of what the compulsive nature of addiction can do to a person. Um, so going further, I realized, look, I shouldn't be in this place. I mean, David, you're better than this. You went to some of the best schools in the country and outside the country, as a matter of fact. You have expensive degrees. You're intelligent. You need to get out of this place. So now this is where parents need to listen. I went to my parents. I sat my mom and dad down and I said, look, dad, mom, I have a drug problem. I need help. And my dad just laughed and walked out of that meeting. Now, he didn't believe that we had hard drugs like cocaine or heroin in Nigeria. He thought it was a Western thing. So he didn't believe what I said to him. And he just felt maybe there was something wrong with me and I'm using drug use to cover it up. He didn't understand the severity of what I was going through. So he left that meeting. And then my mom, uh, all she knew how to do was to pray, which is a great asset to have in your arsenal. But sometimes it's not just enough. So what she did was ask me to kneel down. She prayed for me and poured holy oil on my head. And she asked me to have some food and then asked me to go back to the room that used to be mine before I had my own place. And as soon as she went back to her room, I left and I took her laptop and took it straight back to the bunk. Uh, and I think that was a wake up call for her. That showed her that, look, she had something she was going to be dealing with. Um, so I took the laptop to the bank. I sold it because when you don't have money and you bring your property there, they would exchange it for drugs for you. Now, that was my first cry for help. And it didn't go according to how I thought it would because my parents lacked knowledge on how to handle what I was going through.
Let me interrupt you
So,
there. Let me just interrupt
okay.
you briefly because we're still going to go back to things you said before, but I want to just, talk about that. What do you think they could have done differently at that point? That your first cry for help that might have made it less of a battle for you?
We have a program we're running now for parents, teachers, community leaders, and all. It's first aid. It's called first aid rapid response for people who are struggling with addiction. So there is a process to it. I don't know if we have the time to go through it, but then you
Just
could they
briefly.
could have, they could have nicked it in the bud. The first thing to do is isolation. After isolation, detoxification, and after that, therapy. There's a level of therapy you can give to people who have just begun using substances. So
Okay,
the
so in
first
other
thing,
words, they should have taken you somewhere for help immediately, to somewhere as
not
in,
necessarily, that's the point I'm trying to make. With this
okay,
first aid, they could have ensured that I was locked up at home. That's the
okay,
isolation part. Yes, that's
okay,
the isolation part. Ensure that I was locked up, no access to going back out, no access to cash or anything that can be exchanged for drugs. And then, secondly, detoxification, which takes a period of time. And then, probably with water therapy or certain other vitamins that can flush my system. And then, immediate therapy. Now, the therapy might not come from them because they're not professionals, but then they can take me as an outpatient, taking me for periodic meetings with a mental health therapist, or they can invite the person down to the home to do that. So,
okay,
like I
okay,
said,
gotcha.
it's a whole course on its own that
It's a
we might not be
process.
able to
We'll
go
go
through.
into it
Yes,
later. So from there, so you went to see your parents. They did what
yes.
they knew at that time. Then
Uh-huh.
what happened? So you went back.
I, took- I went back. I took the laptop to the bank, sold it for drugs. And then I started thinking to myself that I shouldn't be there. And what was the next thing I needed to do? Who else could help me? So remember, I was a church boy, right?
Hmm.
Remember, I said I was a church boy. So I said, okay, my pastor, I mean, the pastor is one of the biggest churches in Nigeria. He should know something about this, right? So I get out of the bunk, dirty, filthy, because the bunk's such a horrible place. There's nowhere to have a shower, brush your
Hmm.
teeth. It's so dirty. So I, in that state, I live there and then take a taxi straight to the church with no money to even pay. I get there because my family is relatively known in the church community. I didn't have a problem getting the pay for the taxi, and then I went up the church office to see my pastor, and then he was um he was visibly shaken by the way I looked. I had lost half of my weight. I was looking so unkempt, obviously smelling and filthy. So he says to me, "Look, you need to what's the problem?" I say, "Look, I'm struggling with addiction and I think I need some help." He asks me if my parents know, and I say, "Yes, they do." And then he says, "Okay, where is your phone? Why didn't you call?" And all of those things. And I said, "Look, I've sold it." And all. So he gives me some money, and says, "Okay, go and take care of yourself, get clean clothes, get a good haircut, and then come back at XYZ date." And that's another amateur mistake from anybody. You don't give anybody struggling with addiction at that moment anything
Money.
that he can exchange for drugs, because that compulsive nature will set it in. The money in itself was going to trigger me to go back. So I took that money straight back to the bank to spend. I like to tell people that I spent holy money, anointed money in the bank. I just say that humorously. But yeah, that was another mistake. So again, we have a public figure who did not understand how this works. So
Hmm.
instead of him being in a position to help, he unintentionally even made my situation
Triggered.
worse. Exactly. So now my time is running up, so I'm just going to rush through the rest of the story. So I'm back in the bunk, and then I knew I shouldn't be there. So many horrible things happened. At some point, I went to rehab for 6 months. I got out and I relapsed. And then my case was worse than it was before I stepped into rehab, just like the story of the man who was possessed with demons that Jesus cast out. The demon came back, checked, saw he was clean, and came back with seven more wicked demons. So after rehab, when I relapsed, it became worse. And I started doing so many unspeakable things to get my hands on money to be able to buy drugs. I lost four friends in total to drug overdoses or drug related activities. One of them is the case of a friend of mine who we call Junior. He also schooled in the UK. So while we were in the bunk, we formed the bond because we could relate with each other. And one day, Junior says, David, let's go out to hustle. By hustle, we mean do anything to get money or any commodity we can exchange for drugs. So that day I wasn't feeling too well. And I said, look, Junior, I can't come out with you today. You just go and then come back and then we share the proceeds of whatever you've gotten. So he says, okay, and he leaves. And then that night, Junior didn't come back, which was very unlike
Oh,
him. The next day, he didn't come back. And on the third day, somebody comes into the bunk and tells us that Junior had been killed. What happened? He had gone to rob a jewelry store. He got caught, he got beaten up, and he got set on fire. That was a horrible way for somebody who had so much potential to die. And this was all because he um he he went to extreme measures to fuel his addiction. Now, going forward, I went to Ibadan. My parents tried to change my location. I got there. Certain situations led me to discovering where drugs were sold there. I had an incident that almost cost me to have my leg amputated. All of these time and time again were different wake up calls, different wake up moments where I should have been able to say, David, you need to stop this now. But every time one terrible thing happened, I felt like I just couldn't stop what I was doing. The battle was in my head, it was in my mind. I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but I didn't have the ability on my own to stop it. So at some point I just decided I was going to take my life. I was going to commit suicide. And then one day I'm home and I take uh bleach and rat poison. I put in half a bottle of Coke and then I drink it. And then the neighbor and my brother and my mom rushed me to the hospital. I was going in and out of consciousness. This was around 12 midnight. And then my pastor, my mom called my pastor. I remember they put the phone on my ears and he kept on declaring, David, David, you shall not die, but live to declare the works of the Lord in the land of the living. At some point I passed out, and then from what I was told, I was in the hospital for 2.5 days. I eventually came back, which was such a blessing to me because everybody was around my bedside, and I was discharged. And when I was discharged, I felt different. I felt stronger. I checked myself into therapy for 3 months. Um, I went through this, and that that was the beginning of the end of addiction in my life. The end of 7 years of addiction. So it was a torrid,
7 years.
yes, 7 years in total. Because of the time constraint, I couldn't go into all the details of the story. But like I said, it was a battle that I knew I couldn't win on my own. But through divine intervention, the help of medical professionals, I got better. And today, dedicated a large chunk of my life to ensuring that others don't make the mistakes I made, and also to ensure that I help those who are willing to get help in their journey of recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, you went through it really quick. A lot of things that you left out, and I'll come back to a few of them. First of all, I want to go back to your school because you said you were raised in a Christian home, went to church, went to a Christian university, and you made a point that look, it's not enough. Yes, we like those schools, but that's not really enough.
Mm. Your sound has gone off. The sound has gone off.
Or
No, I
can you see?
can't.
Okay, can you see the comments?
I can hear you now. I can't see the comments. I can't see any comments.
Okay, so quickly, did you have a personal relationship with God, or was it just about what he's gone off now? He's gone off. The audio is not off. It's really just the connection that keeps on going in and out. It's not the audio. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, let me know. It's not from my, I don't know what's going on. Okay, David is back, so I'm going to get him back into the studio. So we said, okay, so two questions quickly. Did you have a personal relationship with God? And okay, it's not enough to put you in a Christian school. What is enough? What are those things that would have helped you, irrespective of what school you went to? Because you will still think that they did their part. They brought you up in the fear of the law, so to speak. What are those things that could have actually stopped you from having that, experience, and being and getting into that in the first place? So two questions.
Okay, I'll answer the first question. At the time, I'd like to think I had a personal relationship with God. But after my encounter with the attempted suicide, and I revisited what I thought was a personal relationship with God, I could see there was a vast difference. So, no, I didn't have a personal relationship with God at that time. And then, secondly, what should have been done differently for everyone listening? Um, Kids, children, teenagers need to be equipped with appropriate life skills before they are let out to go anywhere. For the various age groups, there are appropriate life skills that need to be taught to our children. And these are some of the things that will allow them or enable them to live lives free of addiction. I'll give you examples. Assertiveness. I always talk about assertiveness as a life skill, communication skills, problem solving skills. We have too many parents who solve problems for their children, and it affects them at the end of the day. Because I'll give you an example on how this relates to addiction or drug abuse. Most times, most of the people, clients I deal with currently, will tell me they had a certain challenge, and somebody said, let me be more practical. Today, a mother came to me, of course, crying and all of that, talking about how intelligent her son is. He works as an ad exec. Uh, However, he he um he he has to use, or he's told that he can use substances, including alcohol or any other substances, to be able to do better at his job. So that's wrong. That's what the world is going to tell you. All of us have challenges. Every single one of us have challenges. And using substances is not going to make the challenges go away, or it's not going to solve them. Rather, you're going to create another monster. So that's another life skill that we must teach to our children. So that's one. We must teach our children life skills. Number two, we must teach them the place of purpose. When I was going into Covenant University, did I understand my God-given purpose? Was I already working in it? Was I setting goals to accomplish that purpose? Now, somebody said, once a person does not understand his or her purpose and walk in it, then he or she will be easily swayed away by what feels like pleasure. So in this case, when you don't understand what your purpose is, you find yourself doing things that feel pleasurable. This could include indulging in indiscriminate sexual activities, uh, drug use, alcoholism, cultism, things like that. So parents, it's part of our duties to ensure that our children understand their purpose before they are let out of our sight. And number three, self-discipline is key. Self discipline is key. How disciplined are your children? How disciplined are they in the food they eat, in their sleep time, in their screen time, in their study time? in the way they walk, in the way they dress, in the way they talk. You might wonder how discipline or the lack of it might lead the person to struggling with addiction. But then they are very related. I
Very.
once said somebody, I said something to somebody, if you can't discipline what you put in your mouth, what you eat as a young kid, then you need to be careful because very soon you'll find yourself struggling with addictions. They are very, very related. These things are related. Most of the people I'm helping now or I'm working with, I find out that they have a high level of indiscipline in other areas of their lives. So even when the addiction is over, you can almost tell that they'll fall back into it because they're still indisciplined. I
Hmm.
mean, some of us can't even make our beds when we get up. You know, that's a simple yardstick to measure how disciplined you are. So these are some of the things that should have been put in place before I was let out of the sight of my parents, which weren't put in place. Your audio is gone again, ma'am. Your audio is gone again. I can't hear you.
Very important. Can you hear me now? Can
Yes,
you
I
hear me?
can.
So
Yes, I
I like
can.
that I'm doing this webinar about helping people choose the right university with their children. And I know it always comes up. They're afraid, oh, I don't want them to go abroad because of drugs. I don't want them to go here because of drugs. I keep on saying it's not really about that.
Your audio is gone again. Your audio is gone again. No, I can't.
Is my audio back now? Can you hear me
Yes, it
now?
is.
So,
Yes, I
quick
can.
question. Please ask your questions later so we don't lose them. But, quick question. Do you think being in a sheltered environment as a child will make you go, as in, once you leave home, make you more vulnerable to addiction and other things?
Please explain what you mean by sheltered environment.
So, if sheltered, you're not allowed to have friends, you're not allowed to go out.
I can't hear you again. I can't hear you. It's gone off again. But I had up to the point where you said you're not allowed to go out and you're not allowed to have friends. That's terrible. You shouldn't do that to a person. Look, one of the duties as a parent is to make your child socially desirable to his peers and other adults. That's part of your duty. So we are very negligent in some of our duties, and then we tend to do things like sheltering our children and locking them up. That's no way to bring up a child. It's your duty as a father and as a mother to be able to instill in your child skills, appropriate skills that will make him or her not just desirable outside, but able to manage his or her emotions, his or her temperament, behaviors when they go out. So locking them up is not the answer. As a matter of fact, you lock them up, they come out, they just blow up in your face because they want to experiment on everything that they have not been able to do while they were locked up. No, I can hear you.
Now, can you hear? So, join, my sister, join. Can you help? Can you hear me now? She's
Yes,
going
I
to help
can.
me with the question. My sister's going to join so she can help me with question because I don't know what's wrong with my connection. But the next thing I want you to talk about the children who you had that interaction with, and they were carriers, and also how the responses of their parents, how it affected them. But that's also something I think is important that parents hear that will help us a lot.
You mean the young girls I met in the hotel? Is that the one you're talking about? Okay. So in 2015, like I said, I rushed through my story because of time. In 2015, I went to see one of these dealers that sell drugs, and then he was uh, at a hotel in Abuja. And when I got there, I saw five young schoolgirls who were obviously in junior secondary school. Immediately, I recognized their uniforms, and then I knew it was one of the really good schools in the city. I began wondering almost immediately what they were doing there, and the dealer explained to me that he uses them as his foot soldiers. Those were his exact words. And then how did he get them to this point? So he had somebody at their level who was his nephew or their niece, um, put substances in their drinks in school, and they got addicted or they got hooked on those substances, and then brought them out to him because at, at, at those ages they had absolutely no idea where they could get these things from, right? So somebody now tells them, when the feeling you have wears away and you want to feel like that again, I'm going to take you to somebody who can give you these things. So they bring them out and he's feeding them with drugs and then using them as foot soldiers to distribute drugs to his clients within the metropolis, the Abuja metropolis. And then I felt that was a horrible thing he was doing. But remember, I was also struggling with addiction at the time. There was not much I could do to help them, even if I wanted to. So when you fast forward a few years later, my wife and I and our team went back to the bunk, which is part of what we do. Go back to the trap houses for outreaches. And then while we were going out, we saw one of the young girls, a young girl in the bunk started shouting, "Excuse me, sir." And I turned back to see her. She didn't look familiar at the time. And I was wondering what she wanted. I asked her if she got some of the things we brought to distribute to the people over there. And then she said, "Don't I remember her?" I said, "No, she should please remind me." And then she told me that she was one of the girls I saw 4 years back in the hotel. Now she looked a shadow of herself. She was very slim. She I could now picture her. I could now remember the one she was. And then she looked totally different from the person that I had seen in the hotel that day. Now she was very slim. She just had a vest and boxers shorts that she was putting on. And then I sat down and started having a talk with her. She told me how that dealer at some point was nowhere to be found. All five of them were hooked up on drugs. Three of them were able to speak to their parents and they got the help they needed. But then two of them couldn't speak to their parents about it. However, they remembered that he used to send them to a particular place called the bunks, either to make deliveries of drugs or to buy, to pick up. So they go back there and then they quickly find out the true nature of how things work in the underworld. And then they can't get these substances for free. And where are 15-year-olds supposed to get the sort of money you buy cocaine from? And then very quickly they started selling their bodies in exchange for drugs. And then eventually one of them was able to go back to her parents and say, "This is what the issue is." And she also got help. But this particular lady was still too terrified of her parents. So she was there until she got pregnant and she contracted the HIV. So at that time she went back to her parents. Her father said, "You have caused us too much embarrassment. Go back to where you're coming from." And the family disowned her, so she went back there and started working as a sex slave or a OC bunk, as it's called, where she was cleaning the place and she was paid stipends, which she would in turn still use to buy drugs. So as soon as that happened, we tried to contact various agencies, government and public and private, to be able to set up an intervention for her. And we moved her to the city of Jos. That was the first thing we did. And then we put her on, we got her the medical attention she needed. And then she had started taking her medications. And eventually she took her final exams. And today she's in Cardiff and she's doing extremely very well. Um, I think your question here is what could parents have done differently to prevent that from happening? I'm not sure if that was what your question was because your audio kept going off. Now, another thing I like to teach parents or significant adults is understanding the telltale signs of substance abuse because most of the times these young ones start these things underneath our noses. It usually starts from the parents' house, and then it takes so much time for them to even notice what is happening, so they can't administer first aid, they can't nip it in the bud until it gets blown out of control. So at that time, when in 2015, when those girls could still go to school, but were actively using, all of their parents should have noticed a change in behavior. See, parents, you can't parent without understanding behavioral patterns. I mean, you can't just you can't be so negligent, so lazy, so uninformed that your child develops a different sort of behavior right underneath your nose and you don't even know what's happening. It's terrible. It's really terrible. There's a story of another girl. I was speaking in a teenage church somewhere where I was used to and familiar with. So one of the girls put her head on the table, and I knew her. I know her parents. So I tapped her during the course of my teaching, and I asked what was wrong. When she looked up at me, I saw her eyes. Immediately, I knew that she had an addiction problem. All I needed to see were her eyes. I could tell that she had an addiction problem. So my professional senses will tell me not to make something out of it at that time. So I just pat her on her back and said I'll see her after the service. After the service, I spoke to the head teacher and I said, look, this girl is 16 or 17. I'm not going to counsel her alone. So let's invite her parents. So they invited her parents. The father is an elder, mother is a deaconess, very popular in the church. And the father now felt insulted that I was insinuating that his daughter was struggling with addiction. And I said, look, sir, this is not about you. This is not about your reputation or your ego. I'm trying to help this young girl here. There's something obviously wrong with her. I'm 90% sure it's has to do with drug abuse or addiction. And the father said, no, it's not possible. None of his children can use drugs. So I said, okay, let's do a test on her. To which the father still vehemently refused. But the mother could tell that something was wrong with the daughter, but she didn't know what. So she asked them how the test could be carried out. And I said it was an easy, easy to use test strip, just like the pregnancy test kit. And then you can test for about 10 to 12 different types of drugs in under 5 minutes. So I told the mother to follow the girl into the ladies and get a sample of her urine so we can test her. But then the girl said that there was no need. She was going to tell us everything that was happening. And then she told us how 6 months ago, her uncle, as her father's younger brother, had started giving her marijuana to use. He had come in from the United States. So he was giving her marijuana to use. And he didn't just stop at it, he started sleeping with her. So now he was sleeping with her. He introduced another drug called Refnol, which is a very tiny little blue pill. Uh, and this is a very powerful sedative. This is something that will literally wipe your memory and then make you forget things that happened about 2 hours before and after you had used it. So his idea was when he sleeps with her and she uses this drug, she's going to forget the experiences and she can't maybe talk about it to anybody. But then now it's time for her WIAC examination. And she's studying hard to pass her examinations, but she's having problem remembering what she's reading because every other day this man is giving her Refnol to make her forget what he's doing to her. And that was the burden with which she came to church that day. It took me less than 5 minutes to know, yet it was happening for 6 months underneath her parents' noses. So you see what I say when I say um, parents need to understand the telltale signs of drug abuse. You need to know when something has gone off. You need to be vigilant. You need to you you need to know when your children have started doing things they don't do normally, and then you need to pay attention to these behavioral patterns. You need to search their bags. They are your children. They live with you. You don't live with them. You need to look into their phones, their phone records. Who are they calling? Who are they talking to? Because if the parents of all those five girls were vigilant, they will have known that their children were probably consuming some substances. They were talking to a strange person. They will probably be tired and sleep more after school hours and things like that. So I think that's what the parents needed to do differently. We need to get knowledge. Remember the sons of Issachar, they understood the times that they were in. We are in very dangerous times. We have drugs everywhere now. Drugs are sold on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and they are sold with code names. So you don't even know it. A woman invited me to her house. She was talking about the behavior of her daughter that was very strange. And she was on sabbatical. So she was with the daughter in the house for 3 months. And the daughter had not stepped out. But yet she said the daughter was acting very strangely. So I went there and I asked the daughter if she was going out. She said no, she's not been out of the house for 3 months. And I asked the mother, does she have any guests? And the mother said no. The mother even stopped going to church just to make sure she's with her daughter 24 hours, 7 days of the week. And then while I was there, we had doorbell, and then I asked who it was. It was a delivery man. He had come to deliver muffins, cupcakes, to the daughter. And the mother was the one that received these cupcakes and was taking it to the daughter's room. When I stopped her, I said, "Don't hold it. Let me see these things." And she said, "No, it's just cakes that her daughter likes pastries." I said, "No, let me see it. Give me a knife." The first one, there were about 8 pieces. The first one I cut open had cocaine in it, wrapped in a transparent nylon bag, just the way it's wrapped. And then the cake was baked around it. So these dealers go to extreme lengths to get these things across to your children. You need to be a step ahead of them. You need to be a step ahead of them. You need to understand what is happening in our times. Things have changed. The way your parents parented you, you can't parent this generation that way because it's a total different curriculum. It's a total different thing that is happening now. So get in touch with reality, know what's happening, understand these things, get knowledge. If you have to pay for it through conferences, please do. If you have to pay for it through conferences, please do, so that you understand these things and you're not taken aback or blindsided. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So, there was something that you just said. I want to, reference that quickly.
Your
Denial.
voice is
A lot
very
of people
faint now.
struggle.
I have to go closer to my device. I can't hear you very well. Now I
You
can't even hear you anymore.
okay? Can I just interject? She was going to ask a question to follow up on what you said around denial, but somebody else also had a question around whether you had, without sharing any personal details that you're not comfortable with, whether you had any personal trouble experiences in your past that led you to trying substances, or was it just purely peer pressure? That was a question from the chat.
Okay, I didn't hear the first question. You might have to take that again. But
Yeah,
the second
sorry. So
question, did I have any troubles in my past? No.
yes, yes.
Well, from a very close-knit family, there was nothing that will point to. There's nothing that happened uh that would we could say would be a troubled past or something negative that made me to experiment with substances. Now, it's also important that we know the causes of these things. In my case, it was exposure, constant exposure to it, and then I decided to experiment with it, and then I got hooked. There are several other causes. We also need to understand that we have risk factors or predisposing or pre-existing factors that makes a child susceptible to experimenting with substances. That's also very important. Please, can you take the first question again? I didn't hear you.
The first question was around denial. When the parents are in denial, how can you help such a, what can a parent, how do you help such a parent come to terms with what's actually happening?
90% of parents I've spoken to are in denial until it blows up in their faces, and then they can't deny it anymore. I'll give you an example. There's a young teenager in my church back in Abuja. Uh, one of my a respected adult I call mommy knows her and knows her mom, and um, I keep telling her to tell her mom that this girl is going down the wrong path. And then the mother of this girl will say, no, that's not possible. You can't say that. She was in so much denial for years. I'd noticed that this girl was using substances. And then, excuse me, eventually, a few weeks ago, there was a trending video on social media about a drug party that was hosted in Abuja, where young university girls were all giving drugs, and then you could see that they were um, all experiencing the very severe effects of the immediate effects of drug use in that drug party. Now, that girl that I'd been warning about was in that party. So at this point in time, there was no denial anymore from her parents. So most times parents are in denial. And once it's like that, because when you raise a child is a precious gift. The Bible says the blessings of the Lord make it rich and added no sorrow. You don't want to believe that this precious child that you are nurturing, you carried for 9 months, you've been bringing up in the way of the Lord, is turning into something you do not want. So you keep telling yourself that no, it's not possible. But there's a book I'll recommend. The title is Denial is Not a River. So that's a play on words. Denial is not a river. Because the river Nile. So the Nile is not a river. It talks about how we we choose to live in denial about things that are actually happening. That's what a lot of parents do. It's difficult to help them. All we can do is point out the symptoms that are being exhibited by their children to make them know that these things are real. These people are doing these things. You need to help them. You need to get them help. Some of them will come around, some will not until it blows up in their faces.
Thank you so much. So you touched briefly on predisposing factors that may cause someone to be more susceptible. What are some of those things that a parent could be aware of or realize that, they should be
Okay,
cautious about?
thank you very much. Like I said, it's very important for us to understand the predisposing factors that can make a child susceptible to using substances. I'll quickly go through a few off the top of my head. Number one, which a lot of people do not know, is genetics. It's genetics. Just like many other mental health illnesses, I said addiction is a brain disease. Genetics plays a major role in addiction. So I've seen situations where the great grandfather is an alcoholic, the grandfather died of liver cirrhosis, the father is struggling with alcoholism, and the child is also already 10 years was using alcohol. I talked about in the program I attended recently, I talked about a young boy who finished a bottle. He's 10 years old, who finished a bottle of Jack Daniels, who finished the bottle of Jack Daniels. Um, that's I think that's over 40% of alcohol by a 10-year-old. And then he could still work. Even when I was actively using, I couldn't drink 2 shots of Jack Daniels. But then when I investigated further into this guy's life, I found out that his father is an alcoholic, grandfather alcoholic, great grandfather alcoholic. So it ran in his genes. And then in cases like that, once you are a parent and you are exposed to the knowledge of this predisposing factor that can make your child struggle with addiction, you have to start working towards it. Number two is other related mental health illnesses. There are several mental health illnesses that are intertwined and cause a person to struggle with addiction. An example is what we call general anxiety disorder. General anxiety disorder sometimes predisposes a person to start struggling with addiction, to start using medication that he or she can get addicted to. Number three is uh, treatment for other illnesses. treatment for other illnesses. So there are certain times that, you see, these predisposing factors, what it actually means is of no fault of the child. There's no fault. It's not his fault, that he's going to suffer this addiction. So these are the examples I'm giving. Treatment for other illnesses. There is a drug called pentazocine, which is very addictive. It's used to treat sickle cell patients. And we've had several cases of people who struggle with this um, illness who have used this injection and have gotten so addicted to it. Some of them to the point of amputation of their limbs. That's how terrible it is. We also have the environmental factor. That's another predisposing factor. Raising a child in certain environments makes him or her more susceptible to using drugs because of the culture, the drug culture in that environment. I'll give you one more. The psychological makeup of a child. The psychological makeup of a child. Now you find out that some children are more drawn towards high risk behaviors. This is no fault of theirs. That's the way God in his infinite mercy created them. As a parent, now you have to divert that energy towards positive behaviors. I'll give you an example. My 2-year-old or 3-year-old daughter, she's very, very adrenaline pumped. So you throw her up as high as you can. She's laughing and she's raising her hands and asking you to do it again because she wants more. And then my youngest daughter doesn't like anything that is going to make her heart pump fast. So what does that tell me? The first daughter is predisposed towards high risk behaviors. And then that can make her susceptible to using substances. However, because I already know this, I'm already working towards it. I'm already guiding her and guiding her towards engaging in this thing. So these are some, I think I've listed 5. These are some of the predisposing factors that can make someone, a child, to experiment with substances.
Thank you. Shoma, are you able to try your audio?
Let me try. No,
Okay, you're good.
not
We
working.
can hear you. We
Oh,
can hear
good.
you.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to ask David. Thanks for sharing. Your first encounter, your first contact with drugs, it seemed like a positive thing. They seemed like they were in euphoria. They were happy. Would it have been different if what you saw was a picture of people in a bunker, for instance, looking, like they were going through a really tough time, not looking happy? Would that have changed your mindset about drug use?
Um, Probably, but not certainly, because my first exposure showed me people who looked happy for using substances, and that played a major role in me experimenting with it. However, I, I've seen a lot of people who have seen the negative or the not so good effects of drug use, yet their curious minds will
Hmm.
still make them want to try it out. So I don't know for sure. I may have seen the other side, maybe people in the bunks walking like zombies and then looking tattered, battered, beaten. And I just may have still experimented with it. I may just have said, let me try it. Let me see how much I will be able to fight this thing and come out of it. So it may not have made so much of a difference.
Okay, okay. Just wanted to know, so I think the law of first mention, people mention that as a lot. The first contact with something, so it may not. So you don't want to depend on that. Um, at what Somebody's asking in the comments, at what age do children tend to get addicted? And you mentioned that there are even 9-year-olds who are using now, right? Very young
Yes,
children.
I did. Um,
So any
at
age.
what age the children get addicted? At what age do children get addicted to what is the question? Those of us who
To
still have toddlers, I'm sure you know some of your toddlers are addicted to cocoa melon. True or false?
very, very true.
Some of your children will not eat if they don't watch cocoa melon. Some of your children will not keep quiet on a plane if they don't watch cocoa melon. They are addicted already. Uh-huh. it's not substances at that age, but then their brain has already formed the compulsion to make sure that if they're not watching this cartoon of theirs, they're not going to function properly. So, as little as 2, 3 years old, you already find the compulsive behavior in children. However, when it comes to substances, um, personally, the least age I've seen that's struggling with addiction to substances is age 7. Age 7. I've seen someone at age 7 who is struggling with substances, alcohol in his own case. And then I also mentioned in the beginning, for those of us who joined us late, about a 13-year-old who passed recently with from his struggles with addiction to drugs.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Now I want to talk about the role your mother played, because your mother never gave up. It seems she never gave up, even when everybody thought, David is not, you had different, encounters. You still went back. I want to talk about that. You're not her, but what do you think kept her not giving up and believing and still wanting to help and stand by you? And how did that encourage you in your recovery?
My mom is a woman of faith, and she believed that God had told her that her son will return from the wilderness. So she held on strong to that belief, and she did everything she could, down to the point of asking God to take her own life if He will make me better. So she never gave up. She was always there, coming to the bunks to look for me when I was not home. On 2 occasions, she was robbed, um, but she was always there. You know, this this is this was probably as a result of her faith, and her belief in God and in God's word. Now, you talked about what effect that had on me. It had a tremendous effect because in recovery, it's a push and a pull sort of system where the 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 person needs to push him or herself, the person in addiction needs to push themselves, and somebody has to pull them. I have never, and I'm not saying there's none, I'm just saying personally, I've never seen a person who struggled with addiction and came out of it without a proper support system. You need that support system. And I tell you something, every person struggling with addiction knows he or she has a problem. They look out for that support system. Once that support system crumbles, then the person easily gives up. So in
Hmm.
my case, I knew my mother and my pastor were my support systems.
David, look
Were
at
my
okay.
support systems. So that had a tremendous effect on me. Please permit me to read. I'm seeing something. A comment popped up. A personal one, please. Keeping in mind you're not a psychologist, but would you say having a close relationship with one's father and him being a great model make a child less vulnerable to addictions? Okay, first of all, I'm not sure how this person knows I'm not a psychologist, but I hold a master's degree in applied social psychology from one of the best universities in Nigeria. So that answers the first part of your statement because it was a question. So now I'll go to the second part. Would you say having a close relationship with one's father and him being a great model makes a child less vulnerable to addictions? It will make the child less vulnerable to addictions if the father understands some of the things I've said must be put in place. Number one, if the father is teaching the children relevant life skills. Number two, if the father is teaching the children self discipline. And number three, The father is teaching his child the place of his or her purpose on earth and how to achieve it. It's a good thing for a child to have a good relationship with his father, but that is not enough. That is not enough. If you have an excellent relationship with your father, who is a good role model, and the father is not knowledgeable on some of these things, it will still affect the child of no fault of the child. I was very close to my parents. Like I said, we're a close knit family. Close to my father, close to my mother, yet I struggled with addictions because some of these things I've listed were not put in place.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, but I have to strain my ears.
Awesome. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So the next thing I want to ask you, you mentioned it about addiction. Addiction to what? Now, a lot of us are addicted to phones, addicted to TV, addicted to other habits. Do those things also predispose us to being addicted to also drugs or harmful substances?
Okay, you're asking if our addictions to other things can
General,
predispose
yes.
us. Okay, that's a great question. Um, Not really. In fact,
Okay.
almost almost no. We have several types of addictions. I mean addictions to different things. Um, we have addiction to screen time, addiction to sleep. We have eating disorders. We're not allowed to call it addiction to food anymore for sake of being socially acceptable. So we have eating disorders. We have people who are addicted to sex. We have people who are addicted to their gadgets. We have people who are addicted to gambling. Um, Yes. So will this make us predisposed to getting addicted to? You see, before we started, Ma, you mentioned something. You spoke about moderation,
Hmm.
and then that's where that's where that's where the entire crux of this matter lies. So we shouldn't be addicted to anything because we cannot see its immediate effect on us. Because sometimes you're addicted to your mobile phone, you're not falling sick, you're not losing money, you're not experiencing the severe effects of what an addiction to maybe harmful substances will do to you. So you think you're in the clear. Uh, to answer your question, I don't think uh, struggling with addiction to some of these substances will make you predisposed to using substances. Addiction to some of these other things will make you predisposed to using substances. However, there's a possibility along the line that if you're not disciplined in these other areas, and you find yourself in a situation where you abuse any of these drugs, you just might get addicted to them.
Okay. Okay. So one more question I have, and I don't know if anybody else in the audience has. I hope you can hear me. So how about sometimes I had this argument with a friend. She was saying, oh, that marijuana, which for instance is legal in some countries and in some states, and it's not really a drug. It's just something that it's okay. These are just minor things, cigarettes. But how does those things also affect you? And or if you can do weed for several years, it doesn't make you won't be predisposed to doing crack, for instance. Area. Do you have anything to say concerning that?
Okay, I've had this issue with marijuana and people arguing for it. And I ask myself and I ask them, what's the definition of a drug? That's the question. What is the definition of a drug? A drug is anything that alters the chemical balance of your brain, affects your central nervous system, and affects the way you think, act, or react. That makes marijuana a drug. Now, medicinal use of marijuana in the Western world, in developed countries, goes through a thorough process so that the components of the plant can be extracted and used for medicinal purposes. Tetrahydrocannabinol, the primary component of marijuana, when used or abused, will make you feel different, obviously, which makes it a drug. Now, CNN published a report in 2019 that says excessive use of marijuana can lead to schizophrenia. Other researches have shown that excessive use of marijuana can lead to several illnesses, including sterility in men. And please Google it, please read up on it. These things are there for you to see. So when people tell me it's a drug, I mean it's a plant, I'll also tell you that coca is where cocaine is derived from. It's also a plant. So why don't you go around smoking cocaine because it's a plant? Tetrahydrocannabinol, the primary component of marijuana, is what makes a person high. And then if you're smoking it consistently, it has adverse health and mental effects on a person.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just putting it out there. Thank you so much for that. And you've shared a lot with us, David. Thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for
You're
sharing
welcome.
your story. Thank you for being available to teach us, because the truth is that if we hear more of such stories, it will give us hope and encourage us that look, people can overcome um this fight of addiction. And also, the important thing you've said about parents having those skills, the life skills, your children, is not about keeping them in X school or Z school. What skills have you equipped them with? Because even if they go to a school that's in a monastery, they might find out where drugs are. But can you speak about the support system you mentioned and what a good support system looks like versus an enabling system? So a good support system, can you differentiate it to an enabling system where somebody's actually helping someone who is fighting drug abuse in a negative way? What's the difference?
The major difference between a support system and an enabling system is that those who constitute a support system are people who understand what it takes to help a person through recovery. People who understand the internal and the external triggers that will make a person to go into relapse. People who understand the do's and the don'ts of the recovery process. That's it. So that, like I said, that's another course. That's another course that if you want to study, you would have to take time out to study. An enabling system, an enabler will not intentionally, most times, because sometimes even our parents and family members are enablers. But like I always say, sometimes it's not on purpose. That's why we have what is called family psycho education for people who are going into recovery. So sometimes you, as a mother or as a father, as loving as you are, or a husband or a wife, a brother or a sister, is trying to help a person. You're trying to help the person as a support. You find out that you are the particular person triggering that person to slip back into active use. Why? Because you don't understand what it takes to help the person, which is why we have a course, a program called Family Psychoeducation, where we educate members of a support system on the do's and the don'ts. There are things you shouldn't say to somebody who is in recovery. There are things you can say. There are things you shouldn't do around a person in recovery. There are things you can't do around a person in recovery, because recovery is a life journey. And once a person has struggled with addiction and is now on the recovery journey, it's important that everyone around him or her plays their role as a support in making sure he or she does not slip back. And you can only do this when you understand that role appropriately.
So you have to get educated, definitely, and to know all this, have this, all this, and that's why people like you come in and giving this information. Another question: how can you help someone who is fighting addiction without making them feel judged? And I'll give you, an example. Maybe somebody like a family friend or a family member, maybe they've asked you for money, and you know this person is fighting, and you do not want to send them money, but you don't want them to feel judged. How can you help them or show you care without making them feel judged?
Um, if you have a 5-year-old, and you love that 5-year-old with all of your heart. And the 5-year-old says, Mommy, Daddy, give me the key to your Mercedes. I want to go and see my friend. You're not going to give the 5-year-old that key because you know that he or she is not in a position to drive. That has nothing to do with the love you have for that child. Now, if you are a family member or a friend of someone who is struggling with addiction, and you know very well that that person is in active addiction, and the person asks you for money, you can, using the right words, tell the person that you wouldn't be able to give him or her that money because you know it's not good for them. However, if they are willing to tell you what they plan to spend the money on, you will be able to purchase it for them, especially if it's not something they are buying that can be exchanged for drugs. So it's just a matter of how you put it to them, because you're not doing them any good if you say you're going to give it to them, the money. You say you're going to buy something for them that they can use to exchange for drugs. You're only making the situation worse. So it's all in the approach and the way you tell them about it.
Okay, so this is a question. It's on the screen, so you can read it, and it's you touched on it, when you were mentioning the case of the girl in church, but just a few practical things that some parents who are not informed.
What are some of the signs of drug addiction parents should look out for? The major sign you should look out for is behavioral changes. That's very important. So somebody who used to be very quiet becomes very chatty. You should watch the person. I'm not saying that these signs 100% mean the person is using drugs, but you pay attention. Somebody who used to be very chatty becomes very quiet. You should watch. Somebody who becomes very secretive. So everybody else is in the living room watching the news, and then one of the children, is just deciding to stay in his or her room for extended periods. You should watch the person. When there's a change of friends, ask questions. Why have your friends changed? When there's a drop in school grades, please find out why there's a drop in school grades. When the child becomes very unkempt and doesn't take care of his or her physical appearance anymore, please watch it. When the child starts getting into trouble with the law or with the school authorities more frequently than should, please watch it. When the child becomes very defensive, you ask a very simple question and the child becomes very defensive, please watch it. When the child starts wearing long sleeves and trousers covering every part of their body, please watch it. When you start seeing drug paraphernalia around the child, which is why as parents you should know these things. You should know what a stem is. You should know what Rizla paper is. You should know what a lighter is. You should know what broken razors can be used for. You should know what syringes are used for. You should know what truncate are used for. When you see this paraphernalia around the house, you should know there's a problem. When you start seeing wounds and marks on the hands of a child, you should know there's a problem. When the child's appetite changes, you should know that there's a problem. When insomnia sets in, the child cannot sleep. These are some of the signs that you can look out for, especially when there's a combination of 2 or 3 or 4 of them. Then you should probe further. Like I said, these signs don't necessarily mean 100% that the child is using substances, but please do your due diligence and find out further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very important. So now you're a parent, you've noticed a few of these things that you've mentioned. You mentioned those 3 steps. I know you said that there are lots of things that you can't go into them in this session. But what can a parent do without alarming, making, because you don't want the child to run away. You don't want the child to,
Your your audio is gone, but I think I heard the first part of your question. If you notice some of these things, what can you do as a parent? So, like I said, when you notice these telltale signs, it doesn't 100% mean the person is using. There could be a number of other reasons why a child would display some of these characteristics. However, the first thing you need to do is to have a talk with the child. Once you notice these telltale signs, sit the child down, ask him or her questions. What is the reason why you are looking so unkempt, or you're getting into trouble, or you have changed your friends? Why is it you become so defensive? Have that conversation with your child. It's from the outcome of that conversation you know what to do next. If you find out from the outcome of that conversation that the child is still being very evasive and is hiding something, you can now go a step further to conducting a drug test. And you can do that on your own as a parent. We sell drug test kits that are very easy to use. Like I said, it's like the pregnancy test strip. And then this can test for about 12 to 15 different substances. All you need to do is to dip it in the urine for about 5 minutes and it gives you the results. And then you see for yourself what the child is. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to the principal of a school recently and I said, look, this thing should be done maybe periodically, every term. Yes, it should be done. It should be done because if you are blindsided and this thing is going under your nose, it's going to blow up your face at some point. You know what to do. So if you can actually avoid it by doing this periodic test, it's okay. Now, when you do the test and you read the result and the child is negative for everything, please apologize to the child. Huh? That's something African parents don't like to do. Please apologize to the child and explain to the child why you took those measures and let him or her know that you're only trying to protect them. However, if there's a positive reading to any of the substances in the test, then get professional help. That's when you need to swing into the first aid mode to nip it in the bud and then get professional help for the children.
Thank you. Another question for you.
Do you think your siblings could have helped you with your addiction, considering that you were probably around the same age? Uh, I'm the first. So my siblings looked up to me. And then at the time I was in Coventry University, my immediate youngest brother was in Europe. So he wasn't even around. And my youngest brother was in secondary school. I was, yeah, secondary school. So no, no, my siblings could not have helped me. They don't have the professional capacity to help anybody, not even their sibling who is struggling with addiction. Can you speak on stigmatization you may have received since going public with your story or in your past? Does your past hinder opportunities for you in any way? Um, Stigmatization. Yes, I've had a few people say, "Oh, he's an ex-drug addict. He's not fit for this position or that position." It doesn't bother me. I don't see it as stigma. You know, it's just like pouring water over a turtle's back. It just rolls off me. I've never had to sit down to give it a thought. I've never had to sit down to give it a thought. No, it affects other people, not me. Because your question is about me, so I'll just answer for myself. No, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
ma, faintly, but I can.
Okay. The role of the supernatural, the God factor, because yes, things needed to be done. Going through programs, but for in your own case, what role do you think that God factor played in seeing you today? That you're even helping people who have gone through what a lot of people can't. A lot of people who struggled in the past cannot go anywhere near people who are currently using. How are you able to do that?
Excuse me. I'd never downplay the role of the supernatural in anything in life. If anybody who is very familiar with my story will know that on the 17th of August 2017, something supernatural happened in that meeting, sorry, not that meeting, in that hospital where I'd attempted suicide. Uh, I clearly heard in my spirit a Bible verse that said, I'll put a new spirit within you, I'll put in you a heart of flesh, and I'll take away a heart of stone. and that was just shortly before I woke up. Uh, I always introduce what I like to call spiritual therapy for people who are in recovery. Now, before I go into that, if you look at the 12 steps, 12 steps is one of the oldest recovery model that was introduced in the US many years ago for alcoholics, the Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay.
Now, part of the 12 steps states that your life has become unbearable, you can't manage it anymore. However, it used to be God initially, but now they call it a higher power, so it can accommodate people of other religions and beliefs. There is a higher power that can help you get out of addiction. There is the spiritual aspect of it, and we must embrace it and we must welcome it. Like I said, we have what we call spiritual therapy in our treatment modules. It's also a course on its own. We can't go into details now, but then it's part of what we do because I believe strongly in the God factor in helping people come out of this.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you. I believe so much in the God factor, and I'm glad that you do too. And your story is a miracle. Thank you for sharing with us. And
Thank
for
you.
me, I think, one thing that the parents, we all need to take away from this is, what are you instilling in your child? What skills are you giving them? What life skills are you giving them before you set them into the world? It's so important they have a sense of who they are, a sense of self, a sense of purpose, self-control, determination. So many things that he mentioned earlier. You go through, if you watch the video, you see a list of the things that he mentioned. These are things that will help them say no when they are, they have friends or people around them. And if for any chance you see any child or you suspect anything and you see some telltale signs, a child asking for more money, a child that, sudden changes, more, more introverted than normal, you need to ask some questions. Being in denial is not the answer. Denial is not a river, like that book said. You need to now see how you can actually help your child, you know, and so much, other things. And I want us to connect with David. David, I will share your details to everyone who joined. I think I have most of your email addresses. I will put it in the. I'm not sure I can put it in the comments, but yeah, David. I found David online. You guys can find him. He's very approachable. He's doing a great work. He's now based in the city of Enugu, doing amazing things. Please reach out to him for education, to educate yourselves, to see how you can help others in your community. Thank you so much for what you're doing, David. I'm so happy that we're able to have this conversation today. And for everyone who joined, thank you. If you found it useful,
Thank you.
please do share it with people. It's here. You can still share it. You can still share it for it's going to be here for a while. And also, I'm also organizing a webinar next week, how to help your child choose the right university. You've seen it's not really about it. I've heard parents say, "Oh, my child will not go abroad because of drugs. My child will not stay here because of drugs." It's not really about that. It's beyond that. What skills are you giving your child? There's so much to do. So we need to sit down together and talk through these things. So all the information is there on my page, Chioma Moma, on Instagram. If you follow me there, you'll get all the information on Facebook as well. And please reach out to David, support the work he does. He's doing an amazing work. I'm so impressed at all he's been able to do with God's help. Has a beautiful family. He's a hands-on dad. I love that. And before you go, I want to talk about that because you made a point about that, David, about being an involved father. You know, you said you
About
were
what?
close.
I didn't get that.
You made a point about being an involved dad. Yeah, you made a point about that. You being an involved father, right?
Yeah.
One of your posts, and I wanted to ask about that. I'm not trying to cast any, blame on anybody, but do you think being involved more in your children from an early age will also help prevent drug use later in life, maybe, or any kind of antisocial issues?
Oh yes, I do, especially as a father of daughters. Um, I know I represent their first love, and I have to lay the example for them to know that whoever is going to approach them in future when they're of age has to meet up with what their father has done. So I'm always there. I'm very involved. I don't miss my daughter's uh, school activities, her open day or her career day or whatever it is that needs to be done. I'm there. My second daughter, I change diapers. I give her a shower. I take care of them. I'm very involved with their lives, and I plan for it to remain that way. I do think, apart from the fact that I say this is laying an example for them or setting a standard for them, I also think this is going to help them with their behaviors, their behavioral patterns when they grow up. This is going to instill in them certain values that they need to understand to thrive in life. This is also going to help them to avoid certain social vices that I know are out there. So if I'm close enough to them, then it's easier for me to instill these life skills. Huh? So somebody who you're not close to, you cannot teach because the
Very
person
true.
might not just want to listen to you or pay attention to you. I want
Very
my
true.
daughters to be able to run to me when they mess up outside, not to say, "Oh, my father is going to kill me." Remember the story of those five girls. Three of them were able to go back to their parents, and then they were saved. Two of them weren't able to, and they had a longer journey to redemption. I like the
Thank you.
story of Bishop T.D. Jakes. A lot of us know about the challenges he had with his daughter, and then the daughter was able to go back to her father, who is a public figure, somebody everybody looked up to. And then she found solace in being able to talk to her father. That's the kind of life I want to have with my children. When they mess up, if they mess up, let them be able to run to me. Let them not say that, that is going to kill me, so let me ask another person for help. Because once you don't have that relationship with your children, when they encounter challenges, because I bet you me they will encounter challenges. When they encounter challenges, they will go to other people who might not give them the accurate or the proper guidance that they need. So I'm a hands-on father. I'm there. I change diapers. I pack their lunch boxes. I'm in school when I should be in school and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Any final words before we let everyone go and let you go to get back to your family? Any final words on what parents need to know?
Um, it's important that we understand what addiction is. I explained this in the beginning, and I want us to know as parents that it is our primary responsibility to watch over our children and make sure they don't fall prey to these things. However, if for any reason something happens and then you find them struggling with some of these addictions, please reach out for help. Don't cover it. Don't cover it up. Addiction thrives in secrecy. You can't do it on your own. Once you cover it up, it's going to continue growing until you can't cover it up anymore. Please reach out. Reach out to Auntie Choma, reach out to me, reach out to any professional to help you. It's not the end of the world. It's not a moral failing. It doesn't mean you are failed as a parent. It doesn't.
Yes.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. If you if you nip it in the bud, that child can come up to be greater than you ever expected. But if you are now afraid and say, what will they say in church? What will my community people say? And you start covering it up and you start praying and fasting, you are doing yourself. So please, it's your primary responsibility to help. But then if you find out that things are going out of hand, please reach out for help. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who has joined us. I had a really great time here today.
Thank you so much, David. I'm so happy you were able to make out time from your busy schedule. Thank you for everyone that joined the conversation. Please continue to share and don't forget to reach out. If anybody you know, if you can help, honestly, that child's life can be turned around and the king or queen in that child will come forth.
The audio has gone off of all times. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was a great session. Thank you, sir. And keep up the great work. Thank you, Choma.
I don't know if you can hear me, but
We can hear you.
bye.
We can hear you
Okay, you
now.
can hear me.
Bye.
Thanks. Thanks for joining in. Don't forget to connect with David. Follow me. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see all his details. And don't forget to sign up for the back to school webinar coming up next week. And don't forget to share this video. Have a good night and God bless you. Good night, everyone. If you need to reach out, please send me an email. You can reach me at chioma@gmail.com. Reach out, reach out, reach out, reach out, reach out. So much can be done, and there's so many resources to help you, so many amazing people who can help. Please reach out. Thank you so much for joining. And don't forget to share this video. It's going to be available on my YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to